Oi, all right. How's it going? I'm Grant, you're you. This is the Doodle Review. You're joining us today for another in our roundup series, Sound Bites. This time it's a pop pre-fee. Yep, it's just not letting this restaurant naming convention die. And on today's menu, we're going to be covering recent records from Dua Lipa, Kehlani, No Worries, Omar Apollo, and Kuka. Let's kick it off though with Dua Lipa first, Radical Optimism. Now, Dua is obviously a pop artist that I've been aware of for quite some time. She's been inescapable, but this is the first kind of full body of work that I've jumped into from the artist and listened to from start to finish. 2024 has obviously been a big one for pop divas. We've had Beyonce going country on Cowboy Carter, Charlie XCX painting the town green with the Y2K Trashy Brat, Taylor Swift documenting another breakup on Tortured Poets Department, Ariana Grande getting over a breakup on Eternal Sunshine, and Billie Eilish breaking up with all of her own conventions with the bombastic but sensitive Hit Me Hard and Soft. The most successful of these, I would say, Beyonce, Billie, and Charlie, all wrapped their solid pop tunes in a very distinct, very unique style with a clear vision, making Ariana's muddled genre hopping and Taylor's overindulgence appear to lack clarity and punch, at least by comparison, if not in actuality. Radical Optimism makes a play for the upper end of the category with a pretty clear and somewhat interesting aesthetic take. Executive produced by Kevin Parker, aka Tame Impala, who has applied his trademark psychedelic wash over the top of the album's underlying Eurovision club vibe. This record kind of seesaws endlessly between ABBA pop purity and just kind of pure Eurotrash. Unlike those other records I mentioned that also have a strong identity, sadly, this one just can't pull itself out of the middle lane. Perhaps in another year, when it wasn't fighting off a Brat Summer or a Country Renaissance, this well crafted but totally unchallenging dance pop album of relationship cliches wouldn't feel so dull. But sometimes just that's just the way it goes. Taken as its own thing, there are some great pop songs here, though. These Walls being a bright and sparkling favorite that moves away from straight four on the floor disco pop, and French Exit offering some nice guitar lines and drum breaks to conjure some diversity in the instrumentals. Around the time this record was in rotation for me, I took my mum to go and see the ABBA Voyage show. And so it was quite funny to listen to songs like Houdini and Maria that almost 50 years later are still leaning into those dramatic clavinet and electric piano sounds. This record's absolutely made for radio and I'm sure has racked up millions of streams and fans in the 6 months it's been out. But for those that appreciate good pop music with a bit more attitude and vision, we've really been spoiled this year, and this one just don't measure up. So it's decent, just decent for Dua this time. Onwards now though to Kehlani and Crash. Now, Kehlani is an R&B singer from Oakland, California, now on her fourth album. Her 2017 effort, Sweet Sexy Savage, has always been my favorite from a straight R&B perspective, but I've enjoyed the subsequent releases and the slow evolution she's had as an artist since then. My main gripe with her last record, 2022's Blue Water Road, was its inconsistency. The album went from the artist's staple R&B slow jams, which though not revelatory, are seldom less than good, but from here to some almost Swiftian pop fraff to then some more left field stuff. And it was in this latter category that I think the gold is or was, but it wasn't given much airtime. And I think the same could be said for this record. The first half of Groove Theory honestly could pass for the kind of psychedelic, kitschy pop that ELO, early Bee Gees, or even latter era Beatles might put out if it had more period accurate production applied. Then halfway through, it switches up to a more recognizable neo soul. Later on in the record, we get dark psychedelia using violins or what sound like sitars in Susia, which is really cool. And Tears has an equally dark dose of after hours reggaeton house, and Deep drops some MIA like playground choirs to an interesting effect. Outside of these more experimental tunes, the album runs from staple slow jams to sometimes ill-fitting attempts at country, like Lose My Wife. This feels like the record label's kind of pushing this, intent on making the country revolution happen outside of the States, where I see no evidence for that working. Beyonce's album was exactly that. It was a Beyonce album. Anyway, Kehlani remains a compelling artist for her attitude both on record and off, but Crash is a mixed bag. Its great tracks prop it up to a decent, but the bad ones could potentially pull it down to mid. So overall, it's kind of in between. Next, let's dive into the new album from NxWorries called Why Lord. NxWorries is a collaboration between R&B, soul, hip hop fusion drummer, singer, and songwriter Anderson .Paak and Knowledge, who's a prolific producer and beat maker who, according to Wikipedia, has a discography longer than the phone book of a small city. A unique voice in the hip hop and R&B sphere, Anderson .Paak has carved out a career as the special source that can revitalize, revolutionize, or just raise the bar entirely as part of a collaboration. His Silk Sonic project with the uber talented, but at the time going slightly stale Bruno Mars was a straight banger of funk soul R&B that became one of my favorites of whatever year that was released now. Similarly, his litany of features across most active hip hop artists' record in the last 5 years often prove to be some of the highlights of the track listing he blesses with his rhythmic combo of drumming, rhyming, singing, and charisma. He just turns the dial on the X Factor almost every time. That's not to say that Paak's solo career isn't worth celebrating, but I often find his shtick is best as part of a combo of ingredients. Left unchecked, I find he gets a little bit too high on his own supply, and sometimes that leads to some self-indulgence and even some unsavory music. I personally think he has a bit of a chip on his shoulder when it comes to women, and his very frequent admonishments of the fairer sex and constant declarations of bitch actually kind of grate on me a bit, particularly considering the man is a father and a husband, or at least he was until recently. I think this is on my mind because this comes through so clearly on the track Keep Her with Thundercat, and because I've been listening to Why Lord at the same time as Kate Trinada's latest, which is a record that both of these artists feature on and make separate but similar kind of women berating statements on different tracks. So anyway, that round aside, there is a lot to love here. Daydreaming, despite its OTT guitar solo in its later stages, is a fantastic groove-filled ballad, and this is joined by songs like Move On, Walk On By, and Distant Space. The fusion of smooth R&B grooves and rhymes from Paak with the hip-hop production of Knowledge like 86 Centra, Distractions, and From Here make good on the promise that a collab from these artists would make, and the whole album as a whole is up there as one of the strongest LPs in this genre that I've heard in 2024. There are, a couple of Dilla-esque beat instrumentals that sound great, but maybe a little out of place on the long record. And I'm way past over Dave Chappelle's seemingly constant stream of features on albums over the last couple of years, always serving up basic platitudes like they're the words of the Buddha. And as I've mentioned, Paak's narratives can leave a sour taste sometimes for me, but I can't deny his talent. Overall, this album is great. From here, we'll jump into the latest from US pop singer-songwriter Omar Apollo, who I've been following since his first mini album or mixtape called Apollonio in 2020. His latest, God Said No, is his second full-length LP released back in June on Warner's. And as far back as that first mixtape, the Frank Ocean influences loomed large, but Apollo's abilities to move between pop, R&B, and even strokesy indie with a Latin flavor always impressed me, even through some of the more rote moments of his catalog. While vocally and melodically he might sound like a pure distillation of the 2012 to 2018 indie R&B vibe, and even a little derivative at times, I've always thought his willingness to experiment with different styles and instrumentals from Apollonio through to Ivory indicated an artist that will come into their own, given a little time and a little space. God Said No is vindication of that. It's a confident stride forward. Here, Apollo exhibits way more sense of self and a continued demonstration of his great ear for dynamic production and instrumentals. The first 6 tracks absolutely nail it. We open with Be Careful With Me, a stripped back lo-fi acoustic instrumental that builds atmosphere with interesting melodies and a simple but effective chorus hook. This then gives way to a bit more of a crunchy neo-funk style track in Spite, with one of the strongest choruses on the album. One of the best pop choruses of the year, in fact. After this, we jump to a new wave 80s disco beat, arpeggiated synth bass and all, on Less of You. And from here, it's a classy throwback R&B track with horns, strings, and electric bass following a simple live drum shuffle beat. Rounding out the 6-track run is an effective piano ballad with a powerful lead vocal turn from Apollo, and finally Drifting, an almost 2000s down-tempo track, the instrumental of which could actually fit on like a Roixop album or something. At this point in the LP, the first time through, I'm like, yes, this is it. I've been calling it for a few years, but Omar has finally come through with a classic. Sadly, though, I feel the rest of the album trails off with a lot more slower ballads, which are fine in isolation, but feel overwrought and a bit whiny and a little blah by the end of the record. So I still don't think we're there. This isn't the final phase of Omar Apollo's metamorphosis, but we're very much approaching it for sure. The first half of this record is killer. The rest, a bit of a snooze. Let's call it decent, but just know that some of it's pretty next level. Finally, we're going to close out looking at the album from Kuka, Can You Hear Me Dreaming? So Kuka, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, aka Laura Jane Lowther, is an Australian singer-producer, and this is her second full-length record. Initially on this one, the core kind of dry, crystalline, glitchy digital pop sounds are very engaging, and songs like Wasting Time and Heaven offer a decent start to the album and fun vehicle for Kuka's very airy but sharp vocal delivery. As the record continues, though, the consistent use of these production techniques gets less and less interesting. And by the time we get to Cry, 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 just 4 tracks into the album, the elements just feel like they're constantly being recycled. By the end of the record, it feels like a machine is just generating tunes algorithmically based on a preset number of sounds. There are a few collaborations scattered throughout the track listing, which offer a touch of variety and respite from the stock sound. One More Night with Flume feels kind of like Ellie Goulding early 2010s EDM fraff, but some of the heavier beats and synth stabs at least add a bit of edge. We also have 2 collaborations with an artist called Pesh, and some of these darker moments even feel a bit like kind of Kim Gordon exercising industrial post-punk. While it has a couple decent tracks, a little of this goes a long way, and I'm going to have to say this one is mid. That's 5 records now, so it's most definitely time to knock it on the head. But this has all just been what I think. What are you lot saying? Hit me up in the comments and let me know what you think about any of these albums. And I've put some descriptions to related reviews in the link in the description, so check those out. And if you can be asked to do all that, then you should subscribe. Stick around, share some thoughts, show some love, or just have some abuse in the comments. And I'll see you in the next video. Right, if you're still here, if you're someone that likes my content and has plans to actually watch more of it, then this message is for you. I want you to email me, doodlereview.club@gmail.com, put the subject line as the video that you've just watched, and I'm going to send you something cool. The idea here is that I really want to take this community, it's a small one, it's a tiny one, but I want to take it out of YouTube and do something else at some point. I don't know what that is yet, but if you email me, you're going to be the first in line for it, and I will get back to you with something cool based on the review that you've just watched. Take care, mate. Mind how you go. See you then. Bye.